Guys, happy Wednesday, and thank you guys for attending live our third leading edge session. And I'd love to hear from you guys. How many of you, is this your 2 out of 3 sessions live, or is it 3 out of 3 or 1 out of 3? Drop it in the chat and let me know how many sessions you've been to live. Love to hear from you guys. All right, Katie's 3 out of 3, allotted 2 out of 3, Kristen 1, glad to have you. 3, 2s, 1s, all kinds of different things coming through the chat box. Fantastic. And we're still letting people in. So many people coming today live, and that is fantastic. All right, so are you guys ready to go? Let's have some fun today. All right. So slideshow is up, and we are here today to talk about conversation agility. But before we do that, I want to do a few housekeeping notes. And one of them is to thank our fantastic team that is in the chat today. Our usual team is here of Chelsea and Jen, but we recruited our friend Susan. So those of you who know Susan Collins, she is in the house supporting us today too. And so we appreciate her coming in and helping us out. All right. So for those of you I haven't met, if this is your first out of the 3, welcome. I am Jen Thornton, founder and CEO of 304 Coaching. If we're not connected on LinkedIn, definitely connect with me. I know the team has dropped my LinkedIn profile in the chat. And none of this would be possible without these amazing women on the team. Thank you guys. You guys are amazing. I can't believe that we have pulled this off again this year. And so many great people have been able to attend the class. So great job to everyone, because every single person on this picture had to touch something to make it available for all of us to be here today. So in the past, we've kind of gone through a little bit about e-learning and what to expect, but we're on the home stretch. And I wanted to save that time for some reflection and some exercises here at the end. And so just as a reminder, especially those of you who aren't familiar with our learning model, to create behavior change, we have to be very strategic in the way we spend our time or the way we look at behavior change and learning. And so to create a true learning environment and to really create behavior change, we have to develop competencies, we have to learn hard skills. And remember, the difference is competencies are skills that you use across many, or they're competencies you use across many skills, and skills that are maybe something you use once in a while or every once in a while. It's kind of more that check the box, this is how you do it. But you'll see today how the competencies you've been building through all of Leading Edge start to play into today's session. And today's session is where we start talking a lot about fear and innovation. And I know that's why you signed up, because you wanted to learn more about fear and innovation. All right, so to close that learning loop, for those of you who were with us in session 2, we have to do our implementation. We have to think about our self-coaching questions. We have to do the work if we truly want to create the behavior change. So get your little chat fingers ready, because I'm going to ask you guys some questions. So those of you who were in session 2 last Friday afternoon, those of you who weren't, that's okay. Learn along with us, and you can always watch the recordings. So what we talked a lot about in session 2 is that successful leadership is about strategic conversations. It's about influence, and it is not about directive conversations. And we're going to actually bring a little bit more of that in today. But it's important that we remember that, because as we have conversations, the more that we direct, the more fear we build, which means we reduce innovation. And so when you think about these strategic influencing conversations, we looked at a model that you guys can use as you're building these conversations, and until it gets a little bit more of a habit. And so that model is set a clear and measurable goal. Do never go into a conversation and not know the outcome. Assess the situation, choose the right appeal. And we talked a lot about all the different types of appeals there are when it comes to conversations, and really being strategic about how you approach someone. We talked about structuring the conversation, plan for that unforeseen, rehearse, and in that rehearsal, we've got to get our opening line right. Always tell someone why they're there and what the outcome's going to be. Start with the end and create that full loop and that conversation. And then always debrief. Debriefing, that time you spend with yourself, is helping you create a new neural pathway. If you're constantly going into a directive conversation and that's your brain's fastest way from point A to B, but you know you have to develop yourself and you have to find some new pathways. One of the ways to do that is to reflect, practice and reflect, because what it does is it starts to dig that little pathway. It gets deeper and deeper and deeper every time. So you have to spend that time debriefing in your brain. What went well? What could go better? What did I like? Looking back on it, this is what I learned. That creates a new neural pathway. So in the chat box, if any of you had a conversation and use these techniques, even a piece of these techniques, since we spoke last Friday, I'd love to hear in the chat box, yes, I use them, or here's what I did. Share your learning, because as you share your learning, we're all learning together. And so as you guys are typing some ideas into the chat box, feedback, comments, anything that you can share that creates learning, let's talk a little bit about the self-coaching worksheets. And remember, you guys start typing in comments from session 2. And so remember to always do your self-coaching worksheets. I always say try to do them within 24 hours of completing the training and the education, because that helps you, again, create those new neural pathways. It helps you do the mental work to really change and to think about things. All right, Susan, yes, I use them to negotiate a dog boarding training situation. Fantastic. And we all love Susan's dog. Funny quick story. Susan, who lives up in Connecticut, before we met her, we didn't even know her. She adopted a dog from someone that my friend rescued. No lie, true story. We all started talking to Susan. We met her through another organization and we realized that we knew her dog. So small world in the dog rescue. Yes, Angelica is her dog. All right, so bring in some more ideas. Share how you're using this. And then think about the homework that we assigned. And here's the question I want to ask you guys. When you thought about your conversations, what percentage were directive and what percentage were influencing? Drop that number. Drop the number that was directive. So were you directive 50% of the time, 80% of the time? Did you find yourself being more directive when you were stressed or overwhelmed, or it was a kind of a tight situation? So Diana, yes, we'll be using it to get the budget. Great, it's right. We talked about that last time. Information sharing and collaboration, you used it for. I love that. Fantastic. Worked on the opening line to reduce fear. AJ, great job. And we're going to talk even more about that reduction of fear today. So I'm so glad that you're starting to recognize that opening line in a conversation starts to reduce fear so that you can open up the part of our brain that learns and is collaborative and the part of the brain you actually want people using. So also make sure you're using these worksheets to create that conversation while you're building the new neural pathways. Always debrief after the conversation. And then, as always, in all 3 of these, we have the same homework. Share what you've learned with someone else, because it will stick in your brain as you share it. And so your brain likes this push-pull, right? I'm pushing information into your brain today. When you share it, you're pulling it back out. And it starts to become yours and it starts to become more natural. So always reteach anything you learn to someone else. Find a stranger on the street if you have to and say, do you have 2 minutes? I need to teach you something because it's going to help me. And find a stranger if you can't find someone you know. All right. Has anyone reteached anything they've learned so far, or at least shared the experience with someone? If you have, just drop yes in the chat box that you've shared something or retaught something that you've learned through Leading Edge, because that makes a difference. Oh, look at all those yeses coming in. Absolutely. Good. Fantastic. Yeah. Oh, taught it to my husband. All right. Don't teach him all the good stuff, because then you want to be able to, manage them. Just kidding. That's not true. Well, maybe. All right. You guys are doing, oh, Jen Lenoker, you're here. So good to see you today. Awesome. All right. So let's get started with today's training because today is my favorite. Before we jumped on, Chelsea was like, you seem so relaxed today. And I'm like, because I can't wait to teach this episode or this series because this is one of my favorite things to talk about, and that's conversation agility. But as a reminder, with everything, we're looking at competency, skills, coaching, and real life application to create behavior change. And so the competencies that we're going to work on in this model, and you'll start to see these competencies are showing up in multiple sessions because, again, competencies are built over multiple skills. So we're thinking about leading projects, leading organizations, so delivering the strategy. One of the competencies I love to talk about, delivering the strategy, because at the end of the day, that's what we all get paid for, right? Results, delivering that strategy. Creating innovation, leading people through change. This type of understanding of how to listen a new way will really help you lead people through change. And that's really all we do anymore in today's world, as every day is a new day and we're always leading through change. We're going to also think about effective communication and developing others, conflict management. Very specifically a few things around conflict management that will come up because when we're in fear, a lot of times we create conflict. And I'm going to help you start to listen for that in your team so that you can address it. All right. And then the skills you're going to learn today, you're going to start to be able to hear mental roadblocks in others. In our first session, we talked about your own mental roadblocks, right? Your own need to stay within your mind map and not expand it. But today we're going to help you not only expand your own, but your entire team. You're going to start to think about what type of limiting beliefs are they holding on to, because there are different types of limiting beliefs, and knowing what type they are helps you to think about how to change the conversation. And again, we're going to talk about reframe, refocus, and redirecting conversations so that individuals move past their limiting beliefs and they expand their mind map. I want you guys to just imagine a team with a leader, that's you, that is expanding their mind map comfortably all the time. And you're constantly thinking about how big or what's next or how could this, be possible. And then imagine you're that way as a leader, and imagine every single person on your team had that. That could be incredible. It could be powerful. It could take an organization and change everything about it if we were able to lead in a way where people were expanding their mind maps and reducing fear. And we're going to talk about how to do that. So is that like just not a beautiful world to think about? I think it'd be pretty awesome. Hopefully the 304 team is constantly feeling like they're able to expand their mind map. All right. So Karen, yes, right? Wouldn't that be great? Oh, and Jennifer, yes, we're expanding mind maps. We spend a lot of time thinking at 304 about how to think about things different and bigger and how to, think about leadership in a whole new way. And this team is constantly educating themselves. They're always in programs and they inspire me every day. All right, leaders, all of you are on here because you are leading. So as a leader, you influence and inspire, right? Yep. We help people see what is in reach. Here's the thing as a leader you also do. You see possibilities where others don't. And that's really important as a leader. You've got to be able to see things that the team hasn't seen yet so that you can start to open their mind map up and see what's possible. And you create environments where other people want to follow. That's really your job, right? Like we could go through your job description, we could talk about results and all of those things, but really these are the things that you're doing that actually makes an impact. An impact is super important. And so as a leader, do you ever wake up in the morning and wonder if it's even possible? Can I get my team behind this? I have this vision, but is the team going to buy in? Is the team capable? Like, how do I figure this all out? If you've ever woke up in the middle of the night or early in the morning and thought, how do I figure this all out? And had that, then drop a yes, I've been there in the comments because I know you have. So there better be a ton of yeses in there because if you've never felt that way, I don't know if you're human or not. So absolutely do. Yes. Oh yeah. Good. Yeah. We've all had that. Like, how do we have this idea, right? And then we have this idea and we think what's possible, but then we go, ooh, what is our team going to think? And so then we shrink back down to fit into our team. that doesn't always get us to where we're going. What if we thought that big idea, we got uncomfortable with the fear, and then we helped our team get uncomfortable with the fear so they expanded with us instead of us contracting down into our own fear around our team? That would be powerful. Whenever I teach leadership to new management, oh, very good. Yeah, you start to feel this way. Because it's overwhelming to think, how do I change a group full of people? Believe me, I try to do it every day of my life. I get that. And so I want to take you back to our first session and talk about how do we create innovation. And there were 6 things I gave you in that first session. It was embracing imperfections, never become a master, get curious, manage your thoughts, always ask yourself what could go right, ask yourself what else could be true. And, when we did our recap in session 2, you guys gave me kind of a number that whichever number of these you were really working on. And I've been talking to several of you via email or LinkedIn or just over the phone or text, and you guys have been telling me, which one of these really rang true to you. But what I find is what rings true to you, and instantly there's another one that sneaks up behind you. So if one of these snuck up behind you after the first session, let us know which one it was. Just drop a number. When you thought, maybe I really need to work on managing my thoughts, but then you thought, oh no, I need to get curious. So 6 and 4. So managing thoughts, 4, 5 with a big explanation. Bill, 5. Yeah, fantastic. Hi, Bill. It's good to have you here today. Elizabeth, 6. Fantastic. Elizabeth, I hope you have a whole room of all of your executives with you. Everyone is hopefully enjoying the training today. So I want you to remember how impactful this was to you as a leader, right? All of you guys were sending me messages saying this really changed. Now, what I want you to think about is how to create innovation with your team by using this with your team, right? Helping them start to see it. And I'm going to give you some clever ways to do it because it's not always works if it's right on the surface. You can't say to someone who's having a bad day and upset, you should just think different, because that's directive. And we learned last Friday, it doesn't work. So we have to think about our conversations. All right. So I want to talk to you about this continuum. And fear and trust go hand in hand. You can never have one without the other. And you can never have failure without innovation. Just like you can never have dark without light, north without south, left without right, like all of that stuff, right? They are all there. And I want you guys to really think about this, because as a leader, the more you reduce fear and the more you reduce people's fear of failure, the more innovation and trust you will create. Can you guys see my little arrow cursor? Give me a thumbs up if you can. Hopefully you can, because I'm going to try to demonstrate something for you. Yes. Okay, good. So think about this. You always have both. So say someone's working for you and they're in a ton of fear. And so their fear may be up here, really high, which means they only have space for just a little bit of innovation, right? Maybe their fear is right here in the middle, and you can help them kind of maybe reduce that fear a tiny bit. What if you created a work environment where people were okay with failure, that they were proud of failure, they were proud of learning, that they lived in a place where they were able to expand their experiences and their mind maps without getting in trouble? And say your fear factor, remember that show, Fear Factor? Maybe your fear factor is down here. Wouldn't that be incredible if it was down here? Because then you have all this space for innovation. Wherever someone's failure or fear is, because that's the strong piece of it, right? That's your primitive brain. Wherever your fear and failure is, what's left over is the space for innovation. You've got to reduce the fear. Okay, so that's a lot to think about. Any thoughts, put them in the chat. Any time that you've thought about how you were in total fear and couldn't figure out how to start a project. Anytime that you were like, no matter what, it's going to be okay, so I'm just going to go do this, right? You've probably felt that in yourself. Where do you feel like your team is in this failure continuum? Are they closer to fear and failure and they've got a ton of that? Or are they near trust and innovation? Let us know in the chat box where they're at. And as you do that, I'm going to tell you a story, real life story from a coaching session with an executive yesterday. It was a vice president. And she was telling me a story about something that she had to deal with. And there was someone on her team and she's like, I had to ask him 4 times to do it, 4 times. I'm like, okay, tell me about his response the first time you asked. She's like, he said he was too busy. He was this, he was that. And I'm like, okay, tell me about the second time you ask. Well, he just said he didn't know really where to start and he didn't know who could help him. I'm like, okay, tell me about the third time you ask. Oh, the third time I asked, he was kind of on the fence. Like he was like, I could probably do this. I could maybe move this around. I could maybe do this or that. I'm like, okay, so then the fourth time when he finally said yes, tell me about that conversation. And she said, well, in that conversation, I removed a project because I recognized it was getting in his way. He didn't have the time. And then I assigned him someone else, this other person, to help teach him this piece of code so that he could get it done. And I'm like, and after that, she goes, oh, he said yes, but it took me 4 times. It didn't take her 4 times because the person didn't want to do it. It took her 4 times because she couldn't see the fear in that person and help them reduce fear. And so she was upset because they didn't want to do the work, which creates more fear. What was happening is that person was in fear and needed help to get past it, to get started. All right, so I tell that story, so real life from yesterday. Has that happened to you? Have you looked at someone and you've thought, I've asked them 10 times to do this. Why aren't they doing it? And then you step in and kind of help a little bit and it takes off. Has that ever happened to you as a leader? If so, drop a little yes in the chat box if that story resonates with you. Oh, yeah, right. How many times have we done that? And it's really us not listening. And so let's talk about listening. So when we think about listening, because how many of you have been taught to be a good listener as a leader, right? We all were, right? But we were taught how to listen in 1990, right? These old practices that don't work today. And we learned it in a place where we didn't really understand the brain, right? So we would have thought back in the 90s, well, if someone said no, they just didn't want to do it. But what we know today around the brain is the higher the fear, the less ability for us to problem solve, innovate, collaborate, all that stuff, right? So the higher the fear, the less of the good stuff. Lower the fear, better the good stuff, right? So it just kind of goes up and down together. So what I want you to start to do is not listen to the surface. I want you to start listening to the limiting beliefs. And if we go back to that story that I experienced yesterday with a client, that person's limiting belief was fear, right? I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I have time. I don't know. They were in fear of failure. We could have easily redirected that conversation and solved it at the beginning if we'd been listening for the limiting beliefs. So here's a funny thing too about listening. When we listen to what's on the surface, we fix and direct, right? So I don't know if I can do that project. I'm really busy. Well, make time. I need it done. Or I don't know why this person doesn't want to do it, right? Because we're listening to the surface. We're not really listening to what's going on in that person's brain. And so we move to fix and direct. Directive leadership isn't effective. We know that. The only time it's effective is in crisis management. Buildings on fire, get out. The building is rarely on fire. And so we've got to start to listen and not listen to fix and direct. But we want to start listening for limiting beliefs. And that way we don't direct, but we start to reframe, refocus, we redirect their thoughts. And I'm going to give you some examples that you can put in your workbook today, because you're going to hear these things and you're going to know that you hear them in the office every single day. And when you get to a place where you can hear limiting beliefs in others, you can redirect the conversation, ask the right question, help them move past it, then what you've done is conversation agility. And you've allowed someone to start to expand their mind map in a way that's comfortable and they're not retracting, because you're there to support them through the growth. All right, so that is conversation agility. And if you want to define it, It's the ability to hear limiting beliefs in others, redirect the conversation, and the way where the person can start to see possibilities. How many of you would love to be able to do this with your team? If that's a yes, drop it in the chat, because this can really change your relationships. This can change how you think about working with people, and it will also decrease your stress and your frustration, because the better we lead other people into growth, the more our anxiety goes down around our teams. It's funny, when I talk to leaders, I'm like, what's your biggest, anxiety around your job, or, what upsets you, or what's frustrating? It's always how my team is leading. And so we have to lead better so they can lead better. All right. So with our words, we're going to allow people to expand their mind map. All right. So I'm going to show you 3 different techniques. The first one is reframing. And this is in your workbook where you can write down some of the ideas we come up with. You can also put your own ideas. My examples in here are just examples. I know you guys have them too. So if you have an example you hear a lot and you don't see it, throw it in the chat box and we'll play with it. We'll figure out how to reframe it. And so you want to reframe when people are in fear of failure. And so when you hear someone saying, I'm not real sure I can do that, that's fear of failure. And fear of failure can sound different for different people. It can sound like I've made too many mistakes, or I don't want to do this because what if I screw it up, right? Like we've all said that. And sometimes we say it to a coworker. Don't always think about this reframing to your team. Think about it with your peers, because that could be powerful if you were helping your peers reframe. Someone may be saying, I'm not good enough for what you asked me to do. I know I'll disappoint you, or I know I have disappointed you in the past and I'm scared I'm going to do it again. Or I think there's someone better than me for this project. All of those are fear statements, and it will come in a different way, but those are the ones you typically kind of hear. How many people have heard a version of these from someone on your team? And if so, say yes, because I'm going to give you some examples. So I made too many mistakes, or I kind of screwed this up. Lisa, building confidence reduces fear. Absolutely. But to build confidence, we have to first reduce the fear. You're absolutely right. So if someone says something of that to you, you could say, well, let's talk about what you learned from your mistakes, because you don't learn until you try it. So what have you learned? So again, asking someone what they learned helps them reduce their fear, build confidence, just like Lisa said. The mistakes seem to be less than they were in the beginning. Tell me how you're learning. And you can, again, truth tell. We've talked about this. I've made a lot of mistakes. You have, but I see that you're getting better. So tell me what you're doing that's creating a better output so that we can do more of that. Again, you're inviting them to innovate. You're not punishing them for learning a new skill. I'm not good enough for what you've asked me to do. I know this is new for you, but you've shown me in the past you're really good at figuring things out. I'd like for you to figure this out. I think you can do it. You've proven to me time and time again, when I give you something and you think, I don't know how to do it, 3 months later, you've figured it out. You've got evidence. You can do it this time. What about you allows you to figure it out? What can you bring into this situation? And again, another way to reframe their thoughts. I know I've disappointed you. And then you could say, I'm never disappointed when someone tries something new, right? What did that sound like as a leader? If you said to someone, I'm never disappointed when someone tries something new and grows their skills. That invites them to keep learning and to keep trying. Or I'm impressed how you've jumped in and taken risk. That's really important. I'm impressed how you've taken risk. You're giving them permission to innovate. Because remember, failure and innovation, if it's okay to fail, it's okay to innovate. If it's not okay to fail, it is definitely not okay to innovate, right? How many people have heard that, Elon Musk talk about how much he loves crashing rockets? Because he learns. When he crashes a rocket, he learns. So hopefully I think he just got one to the space station safely, which is a good thing. But the first several, he crashed on purpose because he wanted to learn. I think there's someone better than me for this project. You know what? You're in the learning phase. And what's the benefit of working this out? Like if you work this out, what could be the benefit to you? What could be the benefit to this team? That might be true. There may be someone on the team better, but I see this as an opportunity for you to learn something new and advance your career. And again, you're inviting people to grow, expand their mind map. All right. So those are some examples of how you can think about failure when people have that fear of failure, and how do you reframe it so that they move towards innovation. Now we're going to talk about refocusing. And this is kind of like a state of worry. But what's funny about fear is when we're in fear, we're really good at blaming others because it reduces our ownership, right? And so when we blame, we're cool, we're good. No one's upset at us because not our fault, right? How many people have said, not my fault, I didn't touch that, not my project. So when we start to hear language, especially among peers, this is so important with peers. When we start to hear language where people are judging others to protect themselves, they're damaging relationships and they're damaging the culture, and we have to address it. And this can sound like, what's taking him so long? Everything is going wrong. I'm the only one that can do this. I'm the only one that can get it right. This place, it's always something. I know you guys have either said those, heard those. Let's face it, we've all probably said a version of those. I know I'm guilty of it. But when we start to judge others, again, remember, go back to our number one way to expand our mind map. Get excited about imperfections. When we're judging others, that muscle gets too good and we start judging ourselves and creating our own fear. So if you hear someone say, what's taking them so long? And they're like frustrated, then I need you to say something like, what do they need from you to move forward in this project? What could you do to make a difference? You didn't say, go fix it, go get on them, go make it happen, and go tell them I'm mad, because that's what a lot of leaders do. You said something like, what can you do? What can we do together? You know, you're right. It is off course. What can you and I do to help it get back on course and help the organization? That's a great way to think about refocusing that judgment and blame. Everything is going wrong around here. I love those big words, everything, always, right? Tell me what everything means to you. I love to ask that question as a coach when people give me those big everythings. I'm like, what does that word mean to you? And then they're like, well, you know, it means this. Okay, how often is that true? Let's connect it. Is that true 50% of the time, 60? Oh, it's not everything. It's just some things. All right. So tell me what's going well with that project and what can we do to support it? Again, it's about getting someone out of blame and getting into ownership to move the organization forward. I'm the only one that can get it right around here. A little addiction to being right, which is a whole nother course that I teach around the addiction to being right. That's an executive level course. But what happens is we get a little addicted to our own achievements. And so we start to hear that around the office a little bit. So if someone's like, I'm the only one that can get it right, but they're not stepping in to help, you can say something like, what's a quick share of knowledge you can do? Like, what can you share with someone really quickly to help them move past this roadblock? What are they stumbling on? And what is your knowledge? How can you help them with your knowledge to get it back? Again, asking questions, getting people involved. So how many people have sat in judgment or heard their peers or their team or their bosses set in judgment and think, I can change that conversation with my language? If that is you, say yes in the chat. And hopefully you guys are getting some fantastic ideas on how to reframe. Hi, Emery, good to have you here. Francesca, yes, right, yeah. Fran, it's so good to have you here. All right, this place, it's always something. You know what, you're right, this project is complex. Let's talk about what you can do today to help see some wins. Happens all the time. So Jen, I have to remember to move nourishing conversation styles. That's right. Jen's been through a lot of our conversation intelligence training where we talk about nourishing conversations. And you're right, we've got to nourish more. All right, so our third technique is redirecting. And this is when the person is stuck in the past and can't expand their mind map. And why do we get stuck in the past? It's comfortable, it feels good, it's warm and fuzzy. And remember, it's like the video game we talked about. You're fantastic where you are, and the video game levels up, and that space in which it leveled up, you're not good anymore. You're bumping into walls. You're going, well, if I'd known that was going to open up there, I would have built this here. Or, you know, the guy comes around the corner and bombs you and you've lost, you know, you died. And, you know, so it's uncomfortable. So when that happens in life, we like to go back to comfortable. In a video game, you force yourself through it because you recognize it. So what if we helped everyone else force themselves through it? All right, this is great for change management. So this sounds something like it can't be done. Why do they always ask us to do things they know aren't going to work? Why are we always changing how we do things? I don't understand that. We've never done it this way. I know it's going to fail, right? So it's this like stuck in the past mindset because, again, it's comfortable. Don't get mad at people for doing what they're humanly built to do. We're humanly built to stay comfortable. But since we're all fantastic leaders on this call, we know how to expand our own mind map and we know how to expand others. So if you hear something like this can't be done, you could say, well, what could be done? And if it could be done, what would be the first thing you would do? Just, instead of saying, I don't care if you don't think it can be done, figure it out. We've all said that. I've said it. You've said it. We all know we have. But instead, we need to say something like, if it could, let's just play that you could figure it out. What's the first thing you'd have to do? Again, it helps them get over that first little hump to get them going. Back to the story of I asked 4 times, right? No, you only have to ask once when you can hear limiting beliefs. Why do they always ask us to do things that will fail? All right. If it has to be done, so it's not a failure, so what if it changes everything? Always asking, what if this is the one time it works? There's a million different ways you can address this one. Why are we always changing how we do things around here? Ugh, just when I figure it out, it changes again. I know I've said that before. How might this help us get ahead of the competition? I recognize we're a company that changes a lot, but there's power in that. And the power has been, look at our business. So if we make this additional change, again, how are we going to 2x our last year numbers? How are we going to see what's possible? How are we going to stay above the competition if we're not changing? Get people comfortable with how your business evolves. We've never done it this way. I know it will fail. Again, going back to expanding mind maps, what could go right? And what would be the benefit of figuring this out? I love that question. What would be the benefit of figuring this out? I ask this question a lot to my coaching clients too, because if you start to see what's on the other side of hard work, the hard work is okay. But if you can't see what's on the other side of slogging through the mud and the hard work, why would you slog through it? I mean, right? So you got to get people to see what's on the other side so the work in between doesn't feel so bad. And so what would be the benefit of figuring this out? All right, before I jump into a little bonus training that I'm gonna give you around double clicking, any comments, feedback, thoughts, drop them in the chat. Is there something you've heard someone say to you recently or that you are thinking in your head that we can play with the language and start to think about how to turn it around? So I'll let you guys type in. I wish it had little bubbles like a cell phone does, so I know if you guys are typing or not, just because there's a delay. And so I do weird things like just talk to the screen while the stuff comes in, because that's not awkward, right? All right, Colleen just went through this issue yesterday. We'll never have done it this way before, so I will fail. That's right, Colleen, absolutely. You guys are going through a ton of change where you work. I know it all too well. And people are going to be feeling like they will fail because it feels different, but you've got to help them expand that mind map. So Kimberly, I realize how inferior so many of my teammates are. So this is eye-opening as to how I can redirect my language and leadership styles. Yeah. And again, this is normal for us, right? We've been taught how to listen at the surface. And so we're taking things for face value. We're not really thinking about the human brain and how it deals with fear and how all that stuff comes in. And so now that you know that, think about what's possible for you with that. So much good stuff. All right, double clicking. This is another CIQ technique, but what it's going to do is help you kind of dig down. So maybe someone says something, you're like, there's something there, but I'm not real sure what it is. You want to double click like you do on a mouse, right? It's like you open a folder, double click, you open another folder, double click, you open another folder. You want to keep asking questions to get down to where the truth is. And that will help you start to redirect, reframe, refocus. And so keep asking questions because the questions help people expand their mind, right? Remember, our map is only what we've experienced in our life. We can't understand, acknowledge, or know anything outside of what our brain has experienced. And so when you start asking questions, you start pushing those little boundaries, right? You just start pushing them out a little bit for them. And if you stay with them in that moment and you don't judge and you stay with them and you think about how to make them comfortable, what you're doing is making it comfortable to be in that space of growth. And you make growth part of your culture, part of the way in which people think of you and why they will come to you and how they'll run your business. And we're going to go back to that page 10 in our workbook. In our very first session, we talked about getting curious. And that was a competency, right? And a skill. And now you can see how we've kind of turned it around and we've used it again. And that's why it's important to develop competencies, because you use them across a lot of skills and they get better over time, right? They just keep growing. And so on page 10, you have all those questions. We first talked about how to use those questions on yourself. Now think about how to use those questions on others. All right, so we're coming towards the end, and at the as we start to close out, I want to do some stuff with you guys, so hang with me. But what I want to remind you guys is failure and innovation are always together. Fear and trust are always together. As a leader, you get to decide how much of each is in the room. Are you leading in a way where there's a lot of fear of failure, and so there's not a lot of space for innovation? Or are you leading in a way in directing and using language that helps people reduce their fear, see what's possible, expand their mind maps, and so that the fear and failure start to reduce and innovation starts to grow? As a leader, if you, through the 3 sessions that you showed up for, or you can always binge watch if you haven't seen them, you'll get the replays, please take this with you. Please know every day of your life from here on out, failure and fear set together. And so does trust and innovation. And you're always going to have a little of both, always. You'll never not have some of them. The question is how much of each. If you feel like you want to work on this with your team, put a yes in the little box for me. Let me know why it's important for you to reduce the fear in your team. Is that to improve sales? Is that to improve culture? Is that to innovate a new product? Is that to change your marketing strategy? How could reduction of fear and increase of innovation impact your company? Put it in the chat box, because I want to see, because there's going to be 1,000 different ways this will impact people. Think about reduction of turnover. You know, one of the ways to manage retention is to make people really excited to work for you. If they're in fear every day they drive to the office and they're in fear they're going to get in trouble and yelled at and judged, guess what? They're going to find a new place to work. If you want to reduce turnover and increase retention, get an environment where innovation is king and failure is not, but it's work, right? All right. Oh my gosh, so much good stuff. So improve retention and promotions, great. Innovation for a new program for a nonprofit, fantastic. To gain efficiencies and adjust to the market. Yes, everyone's adjusting to the market these days. Who even knows what the market is? Move the organization forward and stop but this is the way we've always done it. Katie, you're so right. Turnover reduction, join a new team on Monday. And this has been without a leader for a long time. Reducing fear. Oh my gosh, Lisa, that is fantastic that you did this before getting a new team. Oh gosh, think of all the fear they're going to have the first day they meet you, right? How can you start, over this next few days, thinking about ways to respond or ways to use your language to reduce their fear so you can really get to know them. Joelle, this will change results that we've had in the business. Absolutely, it will. Fantastic. Oh my gosh, you guys are such great students. All right, remember, listening for limiting beliefs, reframing, refocusing, redirecting, that's conversation agility. I'm a total nerd, and one of the nerdy things I do is I try to predict the competencies and skills of future leaders. And this is one of the ones that I've predicted. If you don't have this, you're going to struggle in business going forward. Because a lot of people come to me and they ask about generational leadership or how do I do, millennials are like, running things now, whoever's after millennials, like they're always asking me about generational leadership. And I'm always like, let's just talk about the brain, because everyone's brain's the same. Everyone has fear. If you really want to lead into the future, you've got to get fantastic at reducing fear. And you can do that through conversation agility. All right, so we're on the home stretch. So we've learned new competencies today, and we've seen how those competencies have stretched over multiple sessions and multiple skills. You learned 3 new skills today, actually 4, learning how to listen for limiting beliefs, redirecting, refocusing, and reframing, right? You learned those. You're gonna get your self-coaching questions, do the work 24 hours after, get a buddy, do it with them, and then do something with this. Like you've got to, practice this. You've got to start to listen to this. So do your worksheets, and then here's your homework. Now remember, we don't have another session, so I can't follow up on your homework like we've been doing through the other ones. So get a buddy or hold yourself accountable or send me an email and tell me how you did it. But I want you to start listening for limiting beliefs in your team today. And anyone you talk to, your kids, your family, imagine what you could do with this with your kids. That could be impactful. Practice conversations. Replay your conversations in your head. And again, that's going to create those new neural pathways. And as always, share what you've learned with someone else, at least one other person, to help you make this material yours, and then complete all the mental work. All right, before we come into our last exercise, questions, comments, thoughts, beliefs, anything you want to address, drop it in the chat. And again, we'll always stay on for questions after our hour is over, but I would love to hear your thoughts and questions as they're coming up. Hopefully your mind is busy kind of thinking right now. All right, so those of you who said you were 3 out of 3, 2 out of 2, and even those of you who said you were 1 out of 3, I want to know what your takeaways are for Leading Edge 2021. We do Leading Edge every year because we like to give back to our clients and our community. We really stop and think, what do we need right now in leadership? And how do we provide that to the community in a way in which it's open to the world? We've had people, no lie on this, from 4 different countries. And so I want to know what you guys took away from it. It helps us get better. And so if you think about what you've taken away from 2021 Leading Edge, just throw it in, but I'm going to ask you some specific questions too. Elizabeth, definitely asking what could be true. Oh yeah, especially in HR, right? You're going to come in and people are going to be worked up and feeling stuff. And then you can just stop and say, hey, what else could be true? Bernice, better listening. Yeah, absolutely. And a different kind of listening. Because we can always get better, but sometimes, it's about different type of listening. And so in session 1, we adopted a futuristic lens, and Lisa just popped in the answer to this. Good job, Lisa. The 6 mind mapping exercises, and really thinking about how do you expand your mind map. Before you did this workshop, did you understand that your mind was a map? I first learned that concept a lot of years ago, when I first went through my first coach training school, and they taught us about this concept, and I was like, oh, like my mind map was blown. And it has always stuck with me, and I watch people and I can see it, and I always work with my clients around that. Deborah, same as, yeah, Susan, love this. Oh, you're so welcome. And Claudia, what great learning. Great. So session 1, and then session 2, we talked about influence. So if you have anything from session 2 that really resonated with you, drop it in the chat. So Katie, understanding how the mind works is the best way to work around it, knowing others' experiences and roadblocks. Yeah. Maria, I will use the influencing new learnings with my teenage girls. Oh my gosh, that is so smart. Teenage girls, nothing like a teenage girl. My brother's on here. He can attest that I was not a fun teenage girl. He got to watch me get in trouble quite a bit. So yeah, so my brother can attest to that to the whole room today if he wants. So, but, if you're easy kids, sometimes, some of the best leaders are kind of ornery kids, right? Bryce, wow, you have no idea. Thank you very much. All right, so session 3 was today, where we talked about conversation agility. Anything that comes to mind of what you're taking away from conversation agility today, anything that comes to mind when you now know that at all moments of your life, failure, innovation are setting together, and fear and trust are setting together. Anything you took away from that today, drop it in the chat. And remember, you got to do this work yourself because we don't have a follow-up. I love the concept of limiting beliefs. Thanks, Sherry. And working with and managing new executives. Yeah, absolutely. I'll tell you, I love working with executives because they have so much pressure, right? They have so much stress on their plate. And when they start to really understand where it comes from and how to manage it and how to deal with it, because there's no one more fearful than the person responsible for everyone's jobs. I can guarantee you that. And so it's one of the reasons I love to work with executives, because when I can help them reduce their fear and increase their innovation and teach them to do it with their teams, oh my gosh, the possibilities are endless. And Clarissa, helping the team learn to focus. Absolutely. Well, you guys are fantastic. Stay on for questions. But before, for those of you who are only doing a lunch and learn and aren't able to stay on questions, I just wanted to pause and say thank you for attending. Thank you for sharing it with your coworkers. Thank you for being present. Thank you for making me better by dropping everything in the chat and talking with me. It's really hard to talk to empty screen, and so I have to talk to the chat. So I appreciate it. Oh, and we have some questions coming in. Good. All right. So when you think of us, if you need some leadership training in your organization, coaching, talent strategies, which always starts with a talent strategy, you've got to do that first, and the rest comes along. Don't plug in stuff without a strategy, because you're just throwing money out the window. Get you a good talent strategy, and then how do you make that talent strategy come to life? What can be true for your business when that talent strategy comes to life? So if you need help with that, we are here to help you. All right, our Q&A. So Bill, you're very welcome. You're very welcome, Heather. Oh, Amy, so good to see you here. All right, so I'm gonna roll back up to this question. How do you help remove fear without making things too loose? Ooh, good question, right? Because let's face it, sometimes people do things at work and they're gonna need to get in trouble for it. I'd like to pretend that that doesn't happen, but it does. And so you have to talk a lot about what failure means. And so if someone tries something and they get it to 80% and you can help them with 20, like say there's a new software program that everyone in the company is trying to learn. You think they're going to be good at it on day one? No. But if you're always saying to people, hey, I know that's hard to change and have a new system, but we've got to get on it, right? Too many times we just say to people, well, I don't care if you don't like that I changed the system. You got to get used to it. And we walk off, right? And that doesn't really work. But we can say things like, you know what, you're getting there. You're 80% there. What can you do for that 20%? Or I'm impressed that you got it this far without me. How can I help you get it across the finish line? And so you have to help them understand what failure is good. And then bad failure are things like, I just didn't do it. I didn't want to do it. You helped me with my fear and I just chose to miss the deadline without telling anyone. Then there's some accountability or policy violations. But I'll tell you, if you really stop and think about when people are in trouble at work, more often than not, it's they're acting in fear and no one's helped them get past that fear. And if we can start helping people get past the fear, we can improve our culture. We can improve how people work together, how people help each other, and we can reduce the cost of turnover. The cost of turnover is so expensive. I mean, it's just ridiculous. Let's see. Yes, replays will go. Anne-Marie, thank you. It was great. Oh, I'm so glad you enjoyed it. Any other questions? I'm going to kind of roll through here. I have to challenge myself to be more curious. I'll send you the specifics. Yes, Dana, send them to me. So good to have you here, Dana. All right, perfect. Oh, yes. And remember the SHRM credits. Those of you who need your SHRM credits, Susan's going to drop the link in for you so you can pick up your certificates. All right. Any other questions coming through? You guys have been fantastic. So much fun. All right, the SHRM credits are in there. All right, Jen, you're very welcome. All right, guys. And so this was Leading Edge 2021. You guys have been fantastic. I owe you the world. This is really, I always say it's a gift to you, but it's really a gift to me. I meet so many great people through this. I reconnect with so many great people. I learn from you guys. And so it's been fantastic. And my team, oh my gosh, you guys have worked so hard the last couple of months to get this done and to make it beautiful, especially our graphic designers. Hats off to our graphic designers. They made this workbook. I don't even want to know how many hours it took. That puts me in fear. But we want to thank everyone on our side. All right. Well, you guys are fantastic. I'm going to stay on for a few minutes for questions if anyone wants to stay on with me, but I'll let the rest of you jump off. Remember, you can always connect with me on LinkedIn. Chelsea just dropped that link if we're not connected. You can respond to any of the emails that come out from me. I get those directly into my inbox. But I'd love to continue the conversation. I hope you guys have a fantastic week, and I hope you join us for Leading Edge 2022. All right. Thanks, guys. Have a good one.